Here are the 5 books that I read in March. I am surprised, honestly, that I read 5 books this month. I read 5 books last month in my February reading wrap-up. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it up here at the top. I forget which side it's supposed to show up on. But yeah, for February, I read 5 books, and then now for March, I also read 5 books. So 5 books seems to be like my average amount that I usually read per month. Yeah, I would say that this month, it was okay. I had some books that were really, really good. And I had a book, which is this one, that was not good at all. So I'm just gonna go through all of these books and I'll talk about each one individually and what I rated it as far as like star ratings go. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're just gonna get this one out of the way because this is the book that I read that was the worst. This is the first book I read in March actually, and it was not a very good start to the month because this book, I talked about this a little bit in one of my like YouTube short videos, I think. I rated this book 1 star because it was not good. It was so confusing, and that's the reason why I rated it so low, because I had no idea what was happening most of the time in this book, and by the time I finished the book, I was still confused. This is called Famine by Todd Komarnicki. I thrifted this book like I usually do for all my books. So yeah, I really had no idea what to expect with this book, but the back of it, like the synopsis, sounded really good. But basically, this book is about 2 different people, and these 2 main characters are both named David. And that's the first thing that I feel like confused me, because the fact that both of their names were the exact same, it was just kind of hard to keep track of which David the book was talking about. So basically we have David, who is a detective, and he is trying to solve this murder. Well, he believes it's murder. He's trying to investigate this murder of this young boy, and the boy who died, his name was David. David, the detective, believes that David, the body, he believes that he was poisoned or something like that because of the way his body looked. Basically, the detective is trying to find out more about the other David. See, this is so confusing. David, the one who was murdered, he had a girlfriend who he met in a psych ward, I think. And I don't even remember what her name is. Her name's Emma. And Emma has a lot of issues going on. So did Daniel, and so they both ended up at a mental health facility. They get married. Yeah, they get married. The detective thinks that Emma is the one who killed her husband, David. None of it makes sense, and none of it seems to line up. And, you know, when I first started reading this, I was like, oh, well, maybe it'll all make sense at the very end. It did not. And even like me trying to remember like how to even explain this, it's confusing. So yeah, basically it's just a really bad like mystery thriller book. It's not good. I don't know. I'm just done with this book. And I'm not picky about books at all. Like, it has to be like really bad of a book for me to give it a low rating, but this is just not good. So there's that one. Let's put this one down and let's get on to the other ones. The next book I read is a major improvement. This one is The Hunger Games. This is the second book I read, and I read this book before many times. It's one of my all-time favorite books. If you don't know what The Hunger Games is, I highly recommend you either start reading the books, or even the movies are really cool. I binged watched all of the movies after I read this. I just wanted to read this because it would be a nice like throwback. I don't know, I think these movies came out when I was like in middle school or something. So basically The Hunger Games is like a competition, And in this world, the country that this girl Katniss lives in is called Panem. And Panem is separated into 12 different districts. So each year, each district chooses a boy and a girl, and they have to go and compete in the Hunger Games. And it's basically like you fight to the death, so it's kind of like survival of the fittest. Whoever wins at the very end, whoever stays alive, they get to have lots of money and food, and they never have to worry about starving ever again. So that's why it's called the Hunger Games. Basically, Katniss, her little sister, gets drawn to be in the Hunger Games, and Katniss takes her place. And it basically just talks about how Katniss manages to survive. And yeah, this is, I would have to say, out of the 3 books, I would say this first one and the second one, Catching Fire, are like at a tie for like which one's my favorite. This one is a 5-star out of 5 stars, so definitely better than the first book we talked about. So then the third book that I read was this one by Victoria Helen Stone. This is called Jane Doe, and this was a really, really good book too. I almost rated it 5 stars, but I rated it a 4-star. I thrifted this book. I should just stop saying that. I usually thrift all my books just because it's cheaper. But basically, this book is about a girl named Jane, and she has a best friend whose name is Meg, and Meg ends up committing suicide. And Jane doesn't really know why she does it. She starts to remember how Meg used to date a guy named Steven. And she remembers that her and Steven used to have a lot of fights, and Steven was just a really bad guy. And so Jane believes that Steven is the reason for Meg dying. So Jane decides to go and kind of disguise herself as another person, and she goes to work at the same place this Steven guy works at. So she ends up kind of catching Steven's attention, and he starts to like her, but he has no idea that she is Meg's best friend. All this whole time, he thinks that Jane is just this new girl at his work, and he's like really into her, and he starts taking her out on dates and stuff, but Jane really is just trying to get revenge at him for being like such a bad boyfriend to her best friend. As you read the book, you can definitely tell that Steven is very manipulative, and he's not a nice guy whatsoever, and it's easy to see like why he's such a bad guy. She wants to kill him because of how badly he hurt Meg. But she ends up deciding not to kill him. She decides to get revenge on him in a different way. She decides to kind of expose him. Yeah, it was a really, really good book. I was interested the whole time, and I read this book in like 2 days. There's actually a second book of this, and I'm really tempted to read that one. There's so many books that I want to read, but we'll see if I ever get to it. But yeah, this is really good. It's like a thriller type of dark book, but it's really good. Okay, so these next 2 books are very different than these books that I just talked about. Those books were kind of dark and scary, but these next 2 books, the last 2 books I read this month, were like prairie, Kansas themed books, which is just kind of funny to me that I had all of these like mystery, thriller type of like scary books at the beginning of the month, and then I ended the month with these books right here, which are completely different. First, I read this one. This is a Magic Tree House book. I have a couple of these from my childhood. I've just always kept them, but I wanted to reread them. So this is the Twister on Tuesday one. It's just a really fun read. It's super short, so I don't know if I should really count this as a book that I read this month, but it's like 60 pages, but it's just such a fun little book. Jack and Annie, if you don't know, they are the main characters in the Magic Treehouse books. They have this treehouse that they can go inside of, and the treehouse takes them to different places and back in time and stuff. So in this book, they go back to 1870s, and they are on the prairie in Kansas. They go to a schoolhouse, and they meet some kids at this schoolhouse, and eventually a tornado comes. They have to seek shelter from this tornado. So yeah, it's just really fun, and I've had this book for years. Yeah, it was a nice little refresher after reading these really like heavy, crazy books from earlier. So there's that one, and then the next prairie book that I read was from Laura Ingalls Wilder. This is a part of the Little House series, and I believe that this is book number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 books in this series. This is the only one I have, but this is like one of the very last books in the series. It talks about how Laura, she's our main character, she starts to have feelings for this guy named Almanzo. I can't remember if he's in the other books too, but basically her and Almanzo, I can't say that right, Almanzo? I don't know how you say that. Basically, they start spending a lot of time together, and they end up getting married, and she's like 16 when they get married, so definitely a different time. He would always come over to her house where she lives with her family, and they would go on these rides on the, I guess, horse and buggy type of carriage thing they have. I don't know what they call that. And so he ends up taking Laura on a lot of rides, and that's how they kind of start to like each other. So yes, it's a really cute book. I rated it a 3 out of 5 stars, just like the other one. I do wish that this one had a little bit of more like romance, which I kind of understand because this is kind of like a kid's book, so I understand there's probably not a lot of romance in this. I don't know, like even though Almanzo and Laura are supposed to be in love, like on the back it says, could Laura be in love? They don't really act like they're in love. Like there's very little chemistry at all that's happening between these two, and then like all of a sudden they get married. So that's the only thing I wish this book had more of, is the more like romantic side of things. And it's just been a long time since I've actually sat down and read this whole thing. So yeah, it was nice to get back into this series. I don't know if I'll ever read all of the other ones, but yeah, a really good book to end off this month with. Okay, so that is all of the books that I read this month in March. I would have to say my favorite book that I read, honestly, is probably the Jane Doe one. I would say Hunger Games, but I've read that book so many times. And my least favorite book, definitely this one. Yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am looking forward to doing more reading wrap-ups. It is April 4th today, I think, when I'm filming this. And I haven't even started a book yet, so I'm gonna try and start on some new books for the month of April. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!